Humphrey and Fluffy and the Mysteries of Wandle Wood. Percy Peacock goes missing. Humphrey and Fluffy are two small white dogs who live in a very old cottage in Wandle Wood. Here are Humphrey and Fluffy being a little bit naughty. Lots of dogs walk through Wandle Wood with their humans, and they enjoy it very much, but only a few very special dogs know that the wood is magic. When Humphrey and Fluffy's mummy goes to work, something very unusual happens at the old cottage. At the bottom of the human-sized door, a smaller door opens that Humphrey and Fluffy's mummy has never noticed, and oddly enough is exactly the right size for a small dog to fit through comfortably. "Most irregular," said Humphrey the first time this happened, and poking his nose out of the door, he sniffed the air as dogs tend to do. "Humphrey, Mummy will be cross, you must stay inside," said Fluffy. All of a sudden, Fluffy spotted a squirrel. The squirrel's name was Cyril, but he and the small dogs hadn't been formally introduced yet. Barging Humphrey out of the way, he raced outside, barking loudly. "Fluffy, you silly dog, come back!" shouted Humphrey in exasperation. Humphrey chased after Fluffy, who was still chasing Cyril Squirrel. Suddenly, Cyril, with the two small dogs closely behind him, emerged into a clearing in Wandle Wood. Sitting in a circle, looking very worried, were Ruby Rabbit, Millie Muntjac, Ollie Owl and Ferdy Fox. Ruby was clutching what appeared to be a peacock's feather. Cyril, Humphrey and Fluffy sat down with the others and listened intently.
"It appears that Percy has gone missing again,"
said Ollie Owl sternly.
"Humphrey and Fluffy, we are relying on you and your super sensitive noses to save the day and bring Percy home safely."
"Oh, how exciting!" shrieked Fluffy, racing around in circles. "Come on, Humphrey, we've no time to lose." Ollie Owl handed the peacock feather to Humphrey, the slightly more sensible of the small dogs.
"Humphrey,"
said Ollie Owl in a very serious tone,
"as you may know, peacocks are from India, where the climate is very warm. Only the magic of Wandle Woods can keep him safe. We must find him before it's too late."
"Leave it to us," said Humphrey, hastily setting off down the footpath. Fluffy, who was still frantically racing around the clearing for no apparent reason, took off after Humphrey. Humphrey and Fluffy wandered around for quite a long time. Occasionally they picked up a scent and followed it for a while, until it seemed to just disappear and they were back to square one. "Humphrey, Mummy will be home soon. What will happen if we're not there?" said Fluffy. "Let's go and sit on Wandle Hill," said Humphrey. "We'll be able to see Mummy's car coming from there, and we can race home before she notices we're not there." Humphrey and Fluffy climbed Wandle Hill, which wasn't a proper hill but a smallish mound which jutted out from the top of the trees and gave a perfect view of the whole of Wandle Wood and the fields that surrounded it. Wandle Hill was said to be the most magical part of the wood, and a great tree called a holm oak sat on the top. The tree had 4 huge trunks with a space in the centre that was large enough for a person to stand in. Humphrey and Fluffy stood inside the tree and looked all around towards the edges of the wood. There was no sign of Mummy, and the small dogs were giving up hope of finding Percy. Just then Humphrey heard a whisper, "Turn around, turn around." "Shush, Fluffy, I'm trying to concentrate." He heard it again, a little louder this time. "Turn around, look behind you." "Humphrey, that wasn't me. I think it was the tree." "What a silly dog you are, Fluffy. Trees don't speak, even magic ones." Fluffy, who sometimes despaired at his reputation for being the sillier of the two dogs, looked behind him, and, as he did, a tiny flash of bright shiny blue caught his eye. "Humphrey, it's Percy! I just saw Percy!" When Humphrey turned around, he saw nothing. "Don't be silly, Fluffy, you're imagining things, just like you imagined that the tree was talking." "Well, I'm going to investigate," said Fluffy, dashing off in the direction of the blue flash. "Oh dear, why must I be the intelligent one in this partnership?" sighed Humphrey, following reluctantly behind. As they neared the edge of the wood, all they could see was Belinda Buzzard sitting in a huge old beech tree. "I told you, Fluffy, why must you be such a silly dog?" Fluffy bowed his head and looked sad. "I must have imagined it, Humphrey. You're right, I am a silly dog." "Never mind," said Humphrey. "Not everyone can be clever like me." Just then, from behind the beech tree, walked Percy, his feathers shimmering blue and his tail in a huge arc around his head. "Percy!" cried Fluffy. "I knew it was you. Everyone has been so worried."
"Oh, this happens every year,"
said Percy.
"You'd think Ollie would remember, being the wise old owl that he claims to be. Every year I fly to the top of the great oak tree and ask for a companion to live with me in Wandle Wood. The magic of Wandle Wood is very powerful, but alas, I am still waiting."
Percy reluctantly followed the small dogs back to the clearing, where the other animals were still waiting. There was much relief as they spotted Percy. Back at home, the small dogs reflected on their adventure. "Fluffy," said Humphrey, "maybe you are slightly less silly than I used to think. Don't get me wrong, I am still far and away the more intelligent dog, and would have found Percy eventually, but you did quite well today." "Yes, Humphrey, I'm sure you would have found him," said Fluffy with no trace of sarcasm, for Fluffy was really a very kind dog and loved Humphrey very much. The small dogs were exhausted after their busy day. "Good night, Fluffy," said Humphrey. "Good night, Humphrey," said Fluffy, and they both fell fast asleep.